we do that, I just want to make a couple of quick comments about COVID protocols and our meeting, where we're going to be having meetings and whatnot. There's been some questions. As far as masks are concerned, we'll follow the CDC guidance on that. If you are vaccinated, you do not have to wear a mask. If you are unvaccinated, we ask that you do. We're not going to be checking, but it's based on the honor system. And then as far as Zoom and in-person and hybrid and all that stuff, we've had some questions on that. For anybody that was tuned in or here for our meeting last week or tried to watch online, you might have noticed how much we struggled with the online component. So until we have better equipment and we have that addressed, meetings are going to be basically one way or the other. And based on the present rules, we can only have in-person meetings. And so that's what we're going to be doing for the time being. Once we have better audio video equipment and we can host a Zoom and in-person meetings hybrid, we'll attempt to do so. But for right now, we're just going to be having in-person meetings. So thank you for coming.
Thank you for having us.
Do we have a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor? Please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, next on the agenda, approval of the February 9th, 2021 regular meeting and public hearing minutes. Did everybody have a chance to review those? And, anybody have any questions on them?
No.
Entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All right. Motion and support. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Moving right along, next on the agenda is the approval of the March 9th, 2021 Planning Commission meeting. Any comments, questions? Motion to approve?
So moved.
Okay. Any support?
Support.
Motion and support, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Back to our agenda. Up next is old business, Lake Urban Crossing preliminary planned unit development plan. So what we have the concept plans and the plan reviews from our planners. I guess, and I see our applicant is here. Hi. Before, I guess, first things first, do you want to go through your plan, what you have tonight for us?
I mean, basically, based on the last meeting, we brought in, I think today we're sending the parallel plan, but everything else, the amount of acreage, or what have you, open space, right, to go over.
We kind of cleaned up the plans as far as how you guys kind of wanted to see a cleaner one as far as what we're going to get for open space, and kind of adjusted a couple things so that it was easier for pedestrians to kind of access the open space areas. Unfortunately, the parallel plan came today. I thought I emailed it 2 weeks ago when I emailed the rest of the stuff. Again, minor modifications, so it was easier for the public to kind of, or actually the subdivision, the people that live there would access all the open space areas. And then there was something as far as the maintenance agreement too. I think we supplied you guys with that stuff too. Other than that, I don't think there was anything else.
Okay, give me just one moment here, I'm gonna get that parallel plan. Thought I downloaded it. Oops. I want to get that opened. Please bear with me for a moment. Was this it, Ross? I'm sorry?
Trying to look for what time I sent it over.
Parallel, there it is, okay.
155 is,
Yep. Thank you. All right, so here's our parallel plan. So the big difference on this is this lower density over here, right?
Correct, over on the east side of the property, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Now, does anybody, what do you guys think? Do you have any questions, any discussion with the applicant before we get into Zach's review?
how many lots is that parallel plan?
14, I think it was, 13 or 14?
Over here?
On that White Lake Road?
Yeah, coming off White Lake Road.
Well, when we compare that, we just look at overall lots for the whole, so how many lots total is that?
Between the two phases.
It'd be 48 for the first one, and the parallel plan has 14 lots on the second phase.
62 total. And what was the total in the
On the one before that, we had a total of 93, which again, 43 of them were in the first phase, so we had a total of 50 additional lots, is that what it is?
So that, the
48, yeah.
preliminary, the parallel plan, the only really use for that is to determine how many lots that has, is that correct?
Correct.
All right, so 62 is it.
Zach, have you had a chance to see the parallel plan, or is this your first?
I've seen it for 3 minutes.
Okay.
I was hoping to get here a bit earlier, but US 23, just for the short 3 miles I had, did not
Yes.
cooperate.
There's an accident just north of here.
That's bad.
But yes, as alluded to, the purpose of a parallel plan with planned unit developments is to kind of establish a baseline of where are we starting, what could be done if it was developed with traditional zoning. And there are various things that can be done as part of the plan that will allow additional lots, kind of as a reward for doing extra things that the township deems are valuable. And one peculiar thing with your zoning ordinance compared to many others is your parallel plan is based on the future land use map, not the current zoning district. So that's a little interesting wrinkle there.
So that really, I mean, allowed them to have 48 in that section that's medium density in the future land use. So they have a lot more lots.
Yep, versus the
I
RE.
mean, right now is the current zoning all FR?
That's all art.
RE.
So that would have been, you know, they got 14 on that side. That's what they would have got through, you know, similar,
Conventional zoning within.
similar,
the-
same zoning would have been throughout.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's useful here because we can see, you know, without the PUD, they can fit these 13 or 14 more lots in here. These are 2 and 3 acre lots. It's
One's
pretty-
5 at the peninsula.
Right,
Yeah.
That's a nice lot.
which is pretty nice, but I see how it's impractical.
Tough sale.
I'm sorry?
It'll be a tough sale.
Be a lot of money.
Yeah, that's leaving a lot on the table there. Well, Zach, do you want to take us through your review of it?
All right.
Unless the applicant has, do you have anything else you want to add before we start hearing from Zach?
So again, this is kind of similar to a pre-application conference to help guide the applicants as they're preparing and making revisions. I had not seen the parallel plan or the revised preliminary plan, so I'm not going to comment on that so much tonight. I'm going to try to touch on the new stuff from last night. And so the current zoning, as we mentioned just now, is RE, the rural estate. As part of a planned unit development, the developmental standards can be modified. So lots can be made narrower or smaller, or setbacks can be changed. So you'll notice later on in the report, it shows what the current zoning is and then what they're proposing as part of this. So keep in the back of your mind, what they're proposing, and if anyone has real concerns of, I don't think these setbacks or these lot sizes are a good fit at all, now is a good time to let them know to make adjustments, but we don't have to discuss whether or not we're gonna approve them now. Based on the future land use map, the western portion of the property is consistent with the R1 or R2 single-family residential. The eastern portion is consistent with the FR farming residential, which requires much larger properties, 3 acres. As far as a practical matter, if it does get approved as a planned unit development, the underlying developmental standards aren't really important because whatever you guys approve as part of the PUD would be controlling. There is some potential adventures for the uses. So if there's, the uses in the RE may be slightly different from what they are in the R2. I'm not really concerned about that because most site condominiums say single-family houses are what you can do. So from that matter, the zoning it happens under isn't really important because the developmental standards will be approved as part of the PUD and the uses are going to be residential. A bit interesting wrinkle there.
Let me know where I should be on here.
Yeah, I'm going to do the quick version since we got to discuss this a lot
Yeah.
the other day. I'm going to take you to the top of page 7. This is where you have the column on the left side there. We've got one screen up, the other's a little delayed there. On the left-hand side, that's what the current zoning district standards are. 1.75 acres, 200-foot width. You can see the setbacks there too. The middle 2 columns are those zoning districts consistent with the future land use map. And on the far right-hand side is what they're proposing. So again, you're not blessing it tonight. It's part of the package deal with the PUD that you can modify developmental standards. But if any of those are really concerning, it would be good to let the applicants know now so they can make any necessary adjustments. As far as access and circulation, they did add a note that there's going to be sidewalks parallel to the roads. As planners, we're always going to raise the connection about more connectivity, so we're again suggesting finding if it's possible to allow a connection to the subdivision just to the north and slightly to the east, or at least allow for the connection if they want to connect in the future, and a connection between the 2 phases. Again, very difficult to do with the road. You lose some lots, it's very mucky land, and the beavers can cause an issue. So, but we are recommending that there's some way to try to find a non-motorized path, boardwalk or something like that, just so if the kids have friends on the other side, they don't have to go out on the road or try to muck through water. We discussed last time that it is likely that it could be connected with water and sewer. It would be good as we start this discussion for the applicants to have more formal conversations and make sure that there is capacity and any other improvements that they might need. One thing I will bring up is that the plans don't appear to show any landscaping on the south along White Lake. That's something that should be considered. We don't necessarily need to see all the trees or shrubberies at this time, but at least an area that here's where they're going to go. And as was mentioned last time, the road along the northern boundary is next to developed property, so there should be attention for landscaping in that area as well. As far as the planned unit development standards, it's all in section or Article 11 for folks who are following along at home. You've got a lot of language about what the intent is. I will say that this current plan seems to be trending better towards that direction, where like all the wetlands and the most significant natural features are within the common areas within the open space. And we discussed that tends to make it easier to preserve in the future because folks aren't mowing back there as much because all the neighbors are going to pay attention. A couple things from planning side that we are going to push is, one of the things that mentions is convenient recreational facilities. Trails may satisfy that, that's up to this body. And making sure that the open space is usable. They did mention that there were improvements to the plan to make it easier to access some of those. There were some orphans last time, and we're just gonna bring that up to make sure that folks can get to it. For general requirements, I'll not speak about the parallel plan, that'll be for future review. A couple of things is that in order to receive additional lots, you need to do certain things, and it would be, we need to have the math of, here are the things we're doing, and here's the bonuses that we get from the parallel plan for consideration, because as part of your eventual approval, you're gonna say, we believe you've satisfied this and this and this, and here's your bonus. So it'd be good to have that defined clearly, as not necessarily as part of the site plan, but as part of the application materials. And we also want to point out having conversations with the public service folks in addition to utilities, police, fire, post office. I suspect the local post office is going to say we want to have a box for everyone at the mouth of the thing, and so that's good to start planning now to make sure that there's a pull off or whatever on the road. And point out that information about where entrance signs might be, not the specifics, but to make sure that there's a spot to put it where they want to put it that's not going to interfere with utilities or sight lines or landscaping. Generally, it is trending better. Our couple of things are, we need to make sure the parallel plan is consistent. If you guys have any issues with the proposed developmental standards as part of the PUD, now's a good time to raise it. And it's getting more consistent, I believe, with the intent and purpose of the planned unit development. The one other thing, this was, I skipped over this somehow, I got little janky screen stuff here, is even with the revisions, the current site plan does not provide all the required open space. It's short, somewhere around 4 to 5 acres. The zoning ordinance does allow for waiving the requirement. It also allows for providing that additional open space somewhere else in the community. Because of the size of this, it's difficult to recommend waiving the requirement altogether, but that's a part of discussion for this body to have. If you're comfortable waiving it, let the applicants know. If you want to make sure that you have all the space the zoning and ordinance has, now is a good time to let them know too, so they can make adjustments or try to find somewhere else that they might secure it. And that's our quick report.
So am I correct in kind of summarizing that open space remains the biggest kind of thorn, right?
Yep.
And that kind of goes hand in hand with the development standards, right?
Yes, so in this case, the biggest challenge is the amount of wetlands and water. There's a limit to how much of the wetlands you can count towards your open space. So if the wetlands weren't wet, if the beavers weren't there, for example, they probably would be a lot closer than what they were. But from the developmental standards, that's the big challenge right now.
What are some of the what are some of the considerations given to waiving the open space requirement? What in general, what would be some good reasons to do so that wouldn't set a precedent that we don't want to set?
You guys actually have some of those hardwired in. Let me find that. You got another question while I'm searching, I can
I was
work on answering it.
kind of thinking about the same thing, as far as waiving it. And I don't know what you remember, as far as open space go, what was the point of that in the first place?
So we don't become a really, I think, highly
Densely
condensed,
building.
densely populated community. I think that's the,
I just, and I haven't done the research, you probably remember more, Kurt, but just in my office, I've heard people, when I mention the open space stuff that we talk about here, they kind of laugh. And they're like, oh yeah, I've seen them not enforce that tons of times in different things. And now, I'm not one to dive in and research that because it doesn't affect me. But to me, just the word open space, well, that's open space, it's open space, so it's not hard ground, but nature don't know the difference. And for me, whether I'm looking over a wet area or a dry area, I like nature, so to me, I'm really open to the idea of waiving it. That's just my 2 cents.
So the, waiving it, is that waiving the percentage allowed, the wetland percentage allowed towards the open space? And that, I mean, that would probably get us there, is that I mean, that's kind of a note on the plans, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of wetlands.
Planning Commission may recommend the Township Board approve modifications of the 30% requirement that finds that the site characteristics, surrounding natural features and proposed design features and uses lend themselves to different open space requirements. That 30% is
There you go.
that the wetland portion allowed?
I believe it specifies specifically a certain percentage. of
Oh, so it's the
wetland
total
areas.
area.
Yeah, and there's also something in there regarding wetlands particularly.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
wetlands.
35%, I assume the calculation they're having is right, so 35%, using 16.7 acres of the wetlands towards open space.
Yep.
So if we said, oh, you know, we think 50% of it could be, I mean, there's a lot of
it
open
seems,
space in
it
this site.
seems like there's some room here, especially, I mean, considering, sort of the site natural features are so challenging. I'm more open to, working with that requirement a little bit than I would be otherwise. If it was all just a farm field,
Yeah.
and they just wanna waive it just because, but this is a challenging site.
Yeah, and so the question of how do you be mindful of establishing precedent is you look at this property and you come up with findings of, we're recommending waiving these because so much of it is wetland and they've made a good faith effort to provide open space, and further requirements for open space might make the development prohibitively expensive to do. You know?
Yeah, I mean, like a site that, say, you know, another comparable site that doesn't have any wetlands at all,
Yeah.
and met all the open space requirements, I mean, to me, this is still,
We're way past.
we're way past that. It's a better
If
site.
this was a dry field, what would be the open space requirement? And
30%.
30%, and what, let's say there was no wetlands here, what would we be at? Or if we counted all the wetlands as open space.
Well, they'd be way over. There's 47 acres of wetlands,
About 50, yeah.
and you only get a credit of 35%.
Right.
But, I guess, there's still that kind of balance of, there's some of the development standards you said, are, you give up 5 acres of open space and, I don't know. What about the 3 sites right here? How do you kind of commented that in the report.
Which 3?
The 3 that are adjacent on White Lake Road.
91, 92.
What's the plan with those? They're in the driveway on White Lake Road?
I believe the plan was for the easternmost 2, with the one that's adjacent to the new road would be from
the
the
driveway there. So 2 sites would not be using the same entrance. Two parcels on the,
Yeah.
Correct, they come off the White Lake Road.
Would they share a driveway or have their own?
You guys mind if they share a driveway, Wilson? They have one common driveway down the property line and then both of them use it, come in and out?
Because there's only 2 lots.
Yeah, there's only 2 lots. I mean, if you guys want to, or tell them that we can do it, we can put a note on the plan that says that those two lots will have to share one driveway entrance. The road commission would appreciate it too.
Yes.
If it's a road commission,
So where we at on the lot count, now that we got the parallel plan, 62, what kind of bonuses, just rough number are we? How many sites in the proposed plan? That's
93.
93.
Total on the proposed plan.
So is that bonus even feasible? Is that even in the?
I was gonna wait for you guys to get distracted with other things and put me some math.
No.
So,
I'm on my phone, my computer died, so I can try to.
so the residential bonus starts on page 11-7. And so it starts for each element, the bonus can range from 0 to 5%, depending on how much this body feels they've met.
What's the maximum is 15%?
Correct.
So 15% is 62. So we're not even, 92 is like way off.
Yep. And that's where starting with the parallel plan is the most important math for it. So there probably will have to be some tweaks to it unless the parallel plan can be revised to find areas where you can get extra lots in there. So the things that folks can do to receive lot bonuses are providing cluster development where at least 50% of the gross land area is protected open space, inclusion of a variety of building types, quality architecture, durable materials, and superior site design, providing frontage transition areas along all public roads that are at least 150 feet in depth with suitable landscaping, providing public amenities such as trails for non-motorized use, children's playgrounds, picnic facilities, or community centers, providing paths, trails, greenways, cleanup of site contamination, on-site stormwater management that relies on natural systems, and there's kind of a wild card, other similar elements that the planning commission determines are good.
Oh, like those wild cards? Way too subjective.
Potpourri then.
No, I just do it's awful subjective, but, okay. So we can consider one of those things to allow as a trade-off for allowing extra lots, is basically what you're saying.
Yep, so up to 15% maximum increase. For each one of those is kind of a variable range of up to 5%. So if you think, for example, they've really nailed providing paths, trails, and greenways, you can say you get 5% bonus for doing that thing.
Each is 5, so they gotta get 3 of those, to get maximum bonus, that can provide them 71 sites.
Yep. Or if you think they only halfway nailed pathways, then you can award less than 5%. Yeah.
So Zach, you're saying that it's a stretch to get to 93 from 62?
If I believe the math from the revised parallel plan, that it probably is a stretch.
Because basically that's about 50% more lots than the
Yep.
parallel plan.
What was the parallel plan, 62?
62.
62. So the 15%,
71,
Okay.
72. 71.3, right?
I don't know, I keep messing up.
Yeah, because you're trying to put 29 more lots on.
So 72. That's the most we can get to with all those allowances.
Yeah.
That is a challenge. And that is with concessions, which right now, none of these plans have any elements that would satisfy those requirements, right?
Well, the stormwater, I think they could treat some, but
Well, and if we're doing sidewalks in front of all the units,
Yep.
motorized trails, so connect the two phases and sidewalks, and you've got a nice sort of trail system.
Yeah, so I didn't speak to it in a lot of detail. Mostly, I like when applicants to say, here are the things we're trying to do. If you look at the site plan, there's a lot more detail about how the stormwater system's gonna work. It's got pre-bays to get the sediment and pollution to settle out before it goes in. It's gonna use the existing water bodies and wetlands to filter, well, the wetlands to filter before it gets out. So you could make a strong case for that. As mentioned, there is the sidewalks in front. There's been mention of adding accessibility to those others. So there are spots where it's touching, but it doesn't necessarily have a flag planted and said, we're doing this thing and here's how we're doing it, just yet.
What was the other area? There's trails, the way the water's handled, and what was?
The first one, can you go to that first one? Providing cluster development where a minimum of 50% of the gross land area of the development is protected open space.
Yep.
So is this, I mean, there's like a cluster here, but the overall, there's talking the whole, 50% of the entire site is open space?
The way I read it is land area is important.
The lakes
So
do not count.
submerged lands, bottomlands don't count for that calculation. And I say that because it's consistent with another tool that the state of Michigan allows for cluster development, where you get more lot divisions if half of your farm field, the dry field, is preserved. But there are, item B, inclusion of a variety of building types, quality architecture, durable materials.
We haven't got there yet.
We haven't got there yet. They don't have plans, but you know, it's very common to specify we're gonna have brick, stone, and cementitious slat board or wood board, as opposed to the houses are gonna be all siding. So there's a lot of opportunities to work towards that.
So that would be kind of the three, though, right? So sidewalks, stormwater, and building materials, architecture.
Do you guys know of any site contamination?
No, there is none.
Basically, if you look at the hills of Tyrone, they don't have sidewalks, you know, so we're doing something similar, where you're gonna have something natural from the front and the two sides in the back, it's kind of thing, even though it was not, you know, enforced in the hills of Tyrone, but something similar to that. I mean, when you're gonna have high-end and smaller amount of lots in this development, that's gonna cost a ton of money. You're gonna build probably 500,000 to 600,000, 700,000 homes to be able to afford the lot, so it's gonna be, you know, something that's gonna be indicative of the kind of material that these people are gonna use. But we're gonna use something similar to Hills of Tyrone requirements for say, as far as building.
For the aesthetic and stuff like that. I have no doubt that these are gonna be higher end homes.
Yeah. But it's one of these things, I mean, and almost like in every meeting that we had, I just tried to bring up the hardship of the challenging of the lot with the open space. It's not the farmland, it's not all woods. Then you can do a ton of open space. You are almost limited to less than half of the property to develop on, and yet you cannot use that wetland and water as open space. It's kind of a double whammy.
Mhm.
You know, it's very stressful.
Well, and one other potential for additional lots is the item 2D, providing public amenities such as trails, children's playgrounds, picnic facilities. So there's opportunities for that as well.
Wouldn't sidewalks and sort of fall into the trails, or is that?
There's a bit of
disingenuous?
overlap.
Okay.
In addition to the potpourri, there's some overlap, yes.
Well, so what do you think? Where are we stuck right now? Can you kind of, it's number of lots,
22.
22, we have a gap of 22 lots between what the plan says and what our ordinance will allow.
Have you done like a rough site layout of the number of lots based on the parallel plan plus the maximum potential bonus?
No, we haven't done that plan like that, no.
Zach, do we determine whether all of the open space is accessible to everyone on site plan?
That will be part of the discussion, yes, when you get in the public hearing and the approval.
Currently it is.
Currently it is?
Currently it is.
In previous scenarios, there were spots that were definitely orphaned.
Yeah.
And you'd need a helicopter to get to, which would be cool for the helicopter, but there's a lot better connection that's very visible in the plans here. So a couple of things is when we get to the deep review, the first thing is going to be to determine whether or not the parallel plan seems plausible. So that's kind of the very first step. And I unfortunately, again, I haven't had time to review it. And it doesn't need to necessarily be the deep review of where are all the utilities going to go, where are all these things. It's kind of a quick, does it meet the zoning, yes or no? From there, the applicants will have the math. They should share which bonuses they believe they're going to meet. This body will need to decide whether or not to waive the requirement for all of the open space or to allow open space off-site. Now, if the math does check out and the parallel plan wouldn't allow for the full 93 lots, then maybe some of that goes away because there are a couple of lots they couldn't build that now is a tot lot or something like that. And for tonight, kind of for general direction, I think you've had rough discussion of kind of the bonuses, so I think the applicants may have an idea of how to address that. If there are any concerns that you had with the proposed developmental standards, this would also be a good time to let them know that, my gosh, 21,780 square feet is way too small. Or whatever the setbacks are, now would be a good time to let them know we're probably uncomfortable with this.
Well, one thing we haven't discussed yet is the LK1 designation for the lots that are located around the water's edge, I guess would be the term.
But if this project is approved as a planned unit development, that the zoning essentially becomes moot.
Okay. So that's not going to be a problem if it's approved.
Correct.
Okay.
So, so right now, those lots wouldn't, the lots as proposed would not meet LK1.
They may meet LK1, but they wouldn't meet the current zoning district, the RE.
Okay.
So kind of a way to think of it is a PUD is a little mini zoning district.
So kind of an overlay.
Yeah. And so it could be FR and you could approve lots that are 10,000 square feet. And that would be the minimum lot size for this PUD boundary.
Assuming there's
Yeah.
there's a reason to do that. And I think we have a reason to approve smaller lots, but this chart shows, except for in the lot width, we are meeting all the requirements of R2, which is the eastern or western portion of our master plan.
Yeah.
And the eastern portion does not meet the requirements of FR, but does meet the requirements of R2. Correct? Except for that lot width, but I think the lot width, given the site, I mean, there's a lot of funny shaped lots and stuff like that.
So the silence makes me believe that folks aren't really concerned about the proposed standards.
Well, it seems like it goes hand in hand with the number of lots. I mean, if we're 22 lots off, maybe they just need these bigger lots.
And that could be another potential.
It's a pickup for,
Did you say the eastern spot, the eastern portion would meet LK1 requirements?
I think what Dan was saying is the future land use map on the western half of this parcel shows R2.
Okay.
not current.
Not current, the future land use.
No, that's the western portion, eastern
The
portion.
western portion, where the, yes.
Yeah, that first phase, the eastern portion, the future land use map shows it as FR. For some reason.
See, then when we first came to the planning commission, or we started talking about it at the beginning of the project, you know, we were gonna do just phase one. Then because I own the whole property, you know, you folks had asked, you know, what would you develop the whole thing, give us what we look at. So from the get-go, our goal is to go just one part for the sub. And now we discussed the whole thing, so at the eastern side, or that's future land uses R2, on hopes now, we would like to get R2 the whole property. From the last meeting that we had, up to now, we were at 99, we brought it up to 93, so we've done 6 lots down. So, you know, we gave up 6 lots.
Yeah.
And again, I don't wanna keep like a broken record. The biggest hurdle, even though it's natural, it's beautiful, I hunt and I fish that land. It is absolutely gorgeous, but some of the challenges are wetland.
It's just wet.
So we're being penalized on the property, which is so hard to develop and costly, into something that we've been, and I know there could be some flexibility with the PUD, but it's challenging to begin with. We're gonna have a good challenge, you know, to bring in the sewer from the bottom of the hills of Tyrone down to the peninsula, so we have sewer and water, sewer versus septic that's failing all the time. So we're trying to do a lot of things in general to better that development. You know, I just want to feel that we're working together, that was being penalized because of the challenge of the land. You know, so we gave us 6 lots, we're coming back now. Ideally, if, you know, my hopes would be R2 for the whole thing, and we could follow some of your guidelines, otherwise I'll just forget about phase 2 and just do phase 1.
Do phase one. Yeah. I think we wanna get you closer to what your plan is showing.
That's what I'm hoping
Yeah,
for,
I think
you
we
know.
all wanna get there. We're not trying to poke holes in your plan and
I know,
chop it
I
up.
mean,
I don't, well, speaking for myself anyways,
sure.
I wish we could approve it with all 93.
I know. We probably
Unfortunately.
had 6 or 7 planning meetings already, even non-formal ones before. And a couple times they will ask for something, we got like 9 plans already, probably, this whole thing. So,
Yes.
and I don't wanna do something that shouldn't be done, by no
Mhm.
means.
So I did want to clarify as far as the parallel plan, it's entirely blind to what the current zoning district is.
Right.
It's entirely blind. It's very forward-looking to the future land use map. So whether or not the entire parcel is zoned R1, R2, RE, FR, it doesn't matter for the parallel plan. If there's any interest in changing the entry math for the parallel plan, it would require an amendment to the master future land use map.
So Zach, what's the path of least resistance for our applicant from this point? Can you speculate on that a little bit?
Well, the first thing that I would like to do is cozy up with the revised parallel plan for
Okay.
myself. And then have further discussions with them if there's any issues we see or any spots where, they may have had additional lots. So one quirk is the minimum lot area can include some wetlands in it. So there may be some areas where, and it's a really weird, nerdy zoning ordinance thing where you have to look at the nuts and bolts of how the definitions are defined. So there may be ways where there could be additional lots that could go into there. But it would require a bit more review on there. So that's the first spot. The second is, they can begin working already now on defining how they meet the criteria for additional lots. And that's a pretty good place to start. Trying to think the quickest way to get them through while still crossing our I's and T's.
Well, I'd like to get to a point where they can bring something to us that we can hold a public hearing on. I don't want to keep going, I don't want you to keep having to come back to meetings and then give you another task and So,
Yeah, but what I have heard here tonight is that the planning commission feels comfortable with several of the criteria that have been defined already, so they can start working on preparing a better narrative of how we're meeting it. The planning commission doesn't seem too nervous about developmental standards that were proposed, so that's actually a pretty good place for them to be. So that, I think the next time they come back, they should be able to have a pretty buttoned-in parallel plan, and you guys can begin discussion of more of the nuts and bolts stuff. So and preliminary site plan with the PUD bound together. So I don't think they're that far.
Okay.
I know you feel you're very far, but you're not as far, I think, as you feel you are.
And then again, I apologize for you not getting a development plan until, late today. But, that's what we thought from the last meeting. We had, I think, about 4 points, to check in. There's enough water units that Ross was very helpful to checking on. There's about 25 more water units. Talking about the parallel plan, talking about, the additional open space or having that pad that we are proposing to connect these two by path, maybe like, not motorized, but to get you something like this. We thought we're like closer, but now just going back and we're gonna do another parallel plan, maybe like you suggested, maybe we'll have you read it and suggest a couple things. I mean, I just wanna, do something, that we're working with your guidelines and things that you guys are coming in with us for.
We can probably do some offline communications between all of us too, in the meantime, that
Which is
so
great.
you don't have to get all this from the meeting, you don't have to wait until next month.
Yeah, I mean, we started back in June, last June, and I just would like to have something that either we do the whole thing, like hopefully R2, or just do one phase, but start doing stuff.
So I guess what would be the, as far as an option is getting this whole property rezoned to R2? I mean, is that still on the table?
What the only benefit for that would be if you're going to develop it without a planned unit development.
Okay.
But then you wouldn't have the ability to adjust lot area or setbacks. It would, whatever R2 is, that's what you're locked in with.
Okay. So PUD still be the better option as far as all, okay.
Yeah.
So when you did the parallel plan, you kind of just left that same road in there, right?
Well, I took out the two that we came off White Lake.
Yeah,
I took
okay.
one up the gut.
So is that, I haven't reviewed all the standards, but like, that's just barely meeting the minimum?
As far as the road?
No, just like a number of lots you can get in that section.
That
If I
section
played
is-
with it a little bit more, if
That's all right.
we
So
can
what's the
incorporate
lot
some of
size?
that wetland in there.
I'm sorry, I'm sorry.
If we can incorporate some of that wetland in my, let's say the eastern half of the farm one, if I can incorporate some of that wetlands into the properties, I could probably squeeze a couple more lots out of that side over there. So right now, I kinda left the wetlands alone, left it as the open space and kinda used what we had as far as, when we had 50 lots over on that side, just kinda used that same area and came up with like 14 lots.
Hey Ross, that future land use, like, is there like exact boundaries and parcels? Or is it just like that
It's
sketch?
No, they're rough.
It's just rough,
It
it's just kinda
crosses
like
boundaries.
this general area, so.
Yeah.
It's very
Um,
easy to,
Cause I'd have to look at it like comparative to each other, but it's almost like in the future land use map is straight north-south line that splits the R2 and the FR.
yeah, it splits the parcel,
Yeah.
for sure, if I recall correctly. I'm
Oh,
trying to
yeah.
bring it up.
It's on page 5 of the report.
Oh, yeah.
So it is a fuzzy meandering line, and if you recall, the Puro, it's kind of overlapping. I would say the interpretation they've got showing it for phase 1 is probably accurate with the intent. It may not be consistent with where the line falls right there.
I agree.
Yeah, it's not straight with the parcels.
Well, no, and it's not straight with, like you said, the intent, just common sense intent, that's what it, so.
There might be some opportunity there.
pretty generous about how they got it right now, though.
It's,
You took the line straight off the,
it's a liberal interpretation, but not horribly liberal, I suppose. Just maybe blue dog liberal, I guess.
hey, Ross, or Dan, at one point the sewer force main was a question that we thought we were gonna ask the township engineer.
We've satisfied that, right?
Well, not quite, but this is still the concept.
But I mean, they think, they looked at it.
You've been talking with the drain commissioner's office on the feasibility of connecting to that gravity line, correct? You've had some preliminary discussion with them, or?
As far as building a pump station and
Yeah,
bringing it up,
yeah,
yes.
connecting to that
Had
existing-
preliminary conversations with them and asked them if that was a possibility,
Mhm.
and they told us, basically it was, as long as the plans were okay, and we got DEQ approval.
Okay,
Okay.
so that's very,
They-
important.
they
Those are
couldn't-
two
yeah.
important steps. They would obviously need to get the final approval after the plans are prepared, but preliminary.
Preliminarily, that's an okay shape.
And from what we understand, there is more units available, Ross?
Oh, yes, there's more capacity for the system overall, yes.
Okay, so I guess at this point, what do you think we should tell them to do?
Well, I think we've given them direction on what we need. The parallel plan, I think, is the first piece that needs to be completed.
And I suppose the elephant is this July or August for coming back. Probably a July public hearing is very, very tight.
For a public hearing, do we need the final site plan?
You should have something very,
Well,
very similar.
yeah.
Very final.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
when we're into landscaping and the dual driveway for those parcels and that type of
You
thing?
need to double check we're still on preliminary PUD, there's still another final PUD.
Oh,
Yeah.
so that takes two public hearings?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
this week,
Yeah.
the PUD process, yeah.
Yeah, so I would say probably the cleanest version would be in August, so that all of the things can be polished and buttoned up, and the public notice window is available. I don't think there's any harm necessarily in them coming back and asking questions in July.
We have 2 meetings in July, 1 more next week, that we can answer questions at.
Yeah, even coming back at some of these meetings, asking questions, so like you said, call you or call the planner, I mean, we try to do some stuff just to have it cleaner so we can get going. Because if we just August, chances are, by the time you go back in front of the board and the road commission, we're not doing anything until next year. Unless I'm mistaken.
Well, it's gotta go through us, and then it's gotta go through the board, you're right.
And so if you, now we got 2 public hearings,
Yeah, well,
that's the requirement, which is fine.
Yeah, that's been the case, yeah.
But what is it technically, 2 public hearings?
The PUD approval process, this is the preliminary PUD plan,
Okay,
so there are several steps in the process.
okay.
So, but the nice thing with preliminary PUD, it's kind of a rough fit. It's the big question stuff, like how many units, what are the basic developmental standards? And that allows you breathing time to work on the math of how big does this pipe have to be? And where are all the shrubs going, where are all the trees going? So you don't have to bite it all off the first PUD, the preliminary version. And it's actually quite nice to split them sometimes because of that. So even while you're working through the preliminary, you can still be working on those other elements, so you're not twiddling thumbs.
You guys feel comfortable with what we discussed tonight?
I guess my major question is, are we allowed to do, the 99, is that what we have, or 93? Or are you guys gonna hold us to something less? Because I mean, I need to narrow that down too.
That's where I need to cozy up with the parallel plan.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you'll let me know after you kind of do your math and stuff, and I might be able to tweak it a little bit here, a little bit there, if wetlands are, I can include wetlands in part of the farmlands. Because then I can actually take it and modify it a little bit better and actually
Yep.
get a better plan, possibly with another, maybe 4 or 5 lots, if I include the wetlands in the properties.
Yep, that'll be my project,
Okay.
is to look through that and
Okay.
share that information of
Okay,
what else you could do.
okay. I guess other than that, I'm comfortable.
Okay,
And then you guys are gonna look at the, you know, the bonuses and how to get
Yes,
those
we'll,
maximum
we'll do it right up as
50%.
far as the storm sewer and how we're gonna use the wetlands for the storm sewer as,
I
you
see
know,
that
get
one.
the bonus there.
Full bonus.
The walking trails and the non-motorized trails, yes. And I think, what was the last one?
I don't know if we missed any of them, I think we're gonna do them all, yeah.
Well, yeah.
Well, yeah, much as,
Oh, building types, yeah.
building materials.
Almost gonna be given, yeah.
Well, and you guys were gonna do
you
that
would think
anyways.
with the,
We have to, yeah.
To sell these
Otherwise,
houses.
we won't sell any lots.
Yeah, exactly.
And the materials we can take care of in the condo docs, actually. And the other stuff we can kind of find with.
All right, well, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Mhm. Thanks for coming in.
You know, one last question, you know, hopefully if we come back and something we cannot do, then, you know, I'll just ask you guys just to do one phase instead of 2 phases, and, because it's just been challenging. So, we'll see, if we cannot do it, I'll just probably do 1
If
phase.
you do one phase.
Just do one
then you know
subdivision,
you-
forget about that.
That's a little more predictable, a little easier to.
Can we do a public comment at this point? I live on right off White Lake, so I can give them a couple of comments on what all the folks on White Lake are worried about.
Sure.
Okay, cool, thanks. I'm
Yes.
Kim Fracolosi, and I live not too far from this proposal, which I like that idea and concept and what you guys are doing. The big issue is gonna be traffic. A lot of us walk along there as part of our exercise routine, and so an additional 100 cars coming in and out is gonna be a big concern. So in what way can we incorporate something that addresses the existing residents and their happiness with this new sort of massive amount of homes that come? And not so much the homes is the issue as the cars associated with the homes. Because we do like that it's a little 2-lane highway, or road, we don't want it to be a highway. And already traffic is pretty obnoxious on White Lake. So I don't know if there's some way that we can incorporate sort of a better speed limit on that road. No, can't do that, okay. Or something that is mindful of all of that extra traffic that's gonna be right there. So that's gonna be a big concern.
Something to keep in mind.
yeah. Keep in mind that the road's owned by
Something, yeah,
the
just
road
think
commission.
about it, because that'll help with
Slow down kids at place, something along those lines, yes.
yeah, because it's a concern.
Lay it up with a subdivision map on the side.
Well, right, which is nice, but yeah.
Scott?
Scott Dietrich, White Lake Road. You can do it with a petition. I already looked into it. And I already did it. I already did a police study from state police. Years ago, I gave it to Andrew when he was the supervisor.
But
at
who
the time.
decide, these guys don't decide that.
No,
right?
no.
It would
It's
be,
a petition. What you do is you go get a survey.
Now, keep in mind, when you do that study, there's been cases when the speed goes
Yeah.
up.
No, but I'm just saying, we can do it with we can survey the neighbors up and down the road, and we can get the speed limit changed. If we get,
They can change the speed based on the speeds they measure out there.
Well, I was told we had a survey of the people up down the street. We get the majority of the people, we can get it changed. But I'm just telling you what I'm told.
Well, no, what John's saying, he's you're a PE with the
Oh.
expertise in traffic. and-
Okay.
85th percentile.
It's 85th percentile. So a lot of cases, people do that, and they ask the owner of the road, who in this case is the road commission, to do a study like that, and that's gonna set the speed limit.
Yeah,
So,
well,
it's-
like I
there's
said, we
cases
got a
that
lot of
goes up,
line-
because it's
got
based
a
on
lot
how
of
fast the
line
people
drives
go,
on that
right?
road. I live on it, and it's, I almost get killed pulling on my
Sure.
driveway. But anyways, back to this PUD and stuff, you hit the nail right on the head, high density. We're trying to keep this township from having high density areas. Okay, I never liked too much of the open space act anyway. I would rather have it incorporated, I don't know if it's that way, you can go easy way out, in larger lot sizes. It just makes more sense to me to put it on somebody's property. And I know you guys are mentioning in one of the meetings that there's way too many lots that have too much wetlands on them anyway. And Like I said, I'd better see people have larger parcels than open spaces. Because my dad and mom would live over at Green Road in Deerfield, and they did the farmland, over 90-something acres. They put a road on this end, a road on this, and everything else is open space. They could farm it. And that's all they're doing is farming. I mean, but these people can use it in their lawn, their yards. And let's give us people more space for their yards. And like you said, you got the trails and stuff too, so that's just an idea.
Thank you. All right, thanks, guys.
Thank you very much.
We'll see you. We'll be in touch.
Thank you.
All right, new business, Solomonson Recreational Facility Special Land Use.
Hi.
All right, I'm gonna let you go first,
Okay.
and then, let me know, I've got your site plans and stuff, everything you submitted here. Just let me know what you wanna be, what you want us to be looking at.
Well, the site plan review started off like, there was a couple things, initially, like the zoning code and the setbacks that I wanted to address, and we all kind of get on the same page, before we get more in depth of Zach's findings in each
Okay,
area.
sure, well, we can go through the review first if you want.
Okay.
Or I was just gonna give you an opportunity to present your project. I don't think you have to the whole planning commission yet, is that correct?
Well, we had a preliminary last year, it was Zoom. I mean, Kurt was present, but.
That was a subcommittee meeting. right?
Yeah, we were
Correct.
online.
Yep.
So I think what Dan's
So-
saying is it's the first time that some people on the planning commission even heard of this.
Yeah,
So maybe just like a high overview of the entire
Sure,
idea.
absolutely. We are pretty new to the area, 2 years ago now, living off the center in Linden. We are residential area, we have an old barn on our property, and my intention of it would be to develop it as an event center, recreational for the community as well, kind of with the feedback of the board and the community, and see really where we can go with it. The proposal and the plan itself is obviously just structured on what I can control, so the event part of it. And I really haven't been able to dive into the community aspect of it because of the, I guess we would say, hindrance of some of the things that we will have to address today. And that's kind of where I'm at, just because we've only, did one face-to-face with the preliminary review, so I just kind of wanted to get face-to-face with everybody and hear their feedback, and if there was any local community people here today, and see what their thoughts on the plan as well would be.
sure, so this is an existing barn here, this is Linden and Center Road. It's a beautiful barn, and you want to kind of turn it into, my impression after our first meeting was sort of wedding-centric, or are you thinking?
Yeah, I'm thinking bigger. I don't want to just scale it to just that, I really, my pitch would be, we bought this property, I'm a young family, married, one kid on the way, want to grow the community. I don't want it to just be like a commercial, concept. I want to build relationships with the town and provide an area for, the farmers to come, because I am in between RE and farming as well. And I want to keep the integrity of the barn. I do not want to do anything crazy, like anything, demolishing it and rebuilding it. And we're on 10 acres, and I want to keep the event aspect as condensed as possible to keep the open feel of the property as well. So.
And if I could, I'm Chuck Boltman. I'm working with Candace as her architect for the project. And while she has started along with certain things, and I've kind of been catching up a little bit, so this is the first time that I could be here to talk with you. And I would like to introduce some of the concepts as a little bit stepping back from the report. which is why I'd like to speak to you guys before we go to the report. When we talk about our codes, our zoning codes and our building codes, we really are talking about what the community values. And very interestingly, as I've done this, and I'm usually not one to sort of throw out my resume, but I've been working with old timber frames and barns for over 20 years now. I am a board member of the National Barn Alliance. I am a member of the Michigan Barn Preservation Network, Friends of Ohio Barns, Timber Framers Guild, and a number of other organizations, and I'm involved with lots of different states.
You found the right architect.
And I just live down the road in Ann Arbor. And I happen to know Zach from working on a repurposed barn for just this purpose.
I was gonna say, I was gonna vouch for him. We were in similar positions in Dexter Township when Corman Farms for Zingerman did an event facility out there. And if I hadn't seen his name on these materials, I was going to be calling him for help with the carriage house in my house. So we're gonna have to wait on that.
So what I want to step back with in terms of the values is, you know, I have worked in many different places, lived in different places, read lots of zoning codes. Zoning codes and building codes represent our values. What does the community value? And one of the things that we know from the study of zoning codes is that they work pretty well in suburban areas and they work pretty well in urban areas. And they don't work so well in rural agricultural areas because the farms and the were basically, you know, they just sort of had their own little world. First of all, agricultural areas are exempt from some codes, building codes, but they're not exempt from zoning codes. But when was the last time you heard of a family farm being built? From scratch. It doesn't really exist. It's not covered in your code either. And so I can be kind to your code and say that they just thought everything was fine with agriculture, or I can be more negative with a code, anybody's code, and say that they didn't think about the ag buildings. And why would I say that? Well, because more times than not, the agricultural buildings are non-conforming. Because they are. They're in front of the house. In this case, the barn is in front of the farmhouse. Zach, would you like to talk about what you can put in the front yard setback?
We've had these discussions.
Mailboxes.
Of course you have. And your code just doesn't address them. And so I think that I don't think that was from malice. I think it was just from, it never got beta tested that way. And so here we are when we start to come to a group like this. And while I represent Candace, I'm also going to blend into my conversations concepts about what you might want to think about for your entire community. And I do consult with different planning commissions and say, how can you alter your code so that you can help these buildings? Because what do we know about old barns? If they have no purpose, no one invests in them, period. I know that in spades all across the state and beyond. If I can't use it, I am not spending $10,000 or $20,000 on a roof.
Look at that through our town. You could either have the existing
Absolutely.
barns that are being used in upkeep, or they are just being left there and sat
And so this
falling down because people don't want to.
This proposal, like others, is a moment, I think, for the community to sit and think, what do we want, not just for this site, but a little bit for sites all across your township. Zach heard me say words to that effect in Dexter Township. I'm not just asking you for something for Zingerman's. I'm asking you to think about your town. And that's how, in the case of Dexter Township, the zoning code, there was a new section written. So going back to your nonconformities, there's an important aspect to this that I lean on, which is here in this area of Michigan, when we write our nonconformities, we basically write a code that says, and yours says this, to one way, shape, or form, that we don't like these buildings. We don't like them because they don't conform. And why do I know that? Because your code says in multiple different ways that if the building falls below 50% of its value due to fire or lightning strikes or whatever, you're required to tear it down. You can't restore it. And that's common around here. But if you go out of this area and you travel to other places, in particular New England, and you read their zoning codes, they specifically say if that building falls below 50%, you are absolutely positively required to rebuild. Because they value the old structures. And we all know that, whether we've traveled there or not, because we've seen pictures and books, and those structures are right on the road in all kinds of places, and the last thing they want is for people to go, tear it all down, because that's a path of least resistance. But your code, and I'm not criticizing this community, because my code says the same thing, all the codes throughout Southeast Michigan, as far as I know, say the same thing. I don't know one that doesn't. But your code has one anomaly in your nonconformities that I found amazing. Your code spends one page protecting country stores. I've never seen it before. How many country stores do you have here?
Some.
How many? Is there more than one? Was that put in there
I
for the
couldn't
Christmas?
find the answer.
I don't even know what township.
Somebody spent a page writing the requirements for protecting one, maybe one building, maybe it's 6 buildings, but I can't believe you have more than 6 country stores. How many barns do you have?
Hundreds, dozens.
And how much thought have you given to protecting them?
I would assume the lack of thought was because no one expected anyone to want to build a new one.
Correct. And no one was expecting for them to be repurposed for another use.
Repurposed, yes.
And those things were never tested in your code, so they're absent, and I agree. I'm not saying that there's anything malicious in the code, but I'm pointing it out because I run into it over and over again. I can't do this because the code, even though people say, what you're doing is wonderful, and we want you to do that, it looks right, but we can't allow it because the bureaucracy of the code says no.
Well, and that's the hiccup with some of the findings that Zach and the review and everything is, like,
Correct.
where do we
He
go?
has no
That's
choice.
why I want your opinion as well, like, I don't even know what avenue we should go down.
Right. So what we also know from your master plan, there's all kinds of references to your rich agricultural past, the foundings of this community. I've read all 159 pages of it, not every word. And it says over and over again that you value this stuff. You have pictures of your older buildings in your master plan because you value that stuff. But you don't make it easy for me as an architect to protect that stuff. Because this building in particular is in a front yard setback. This building in particular is too close to the road. I'm not sure I'm gonna say it right, but all of your old buildings in Parshville, what's it called? Parshville, they're all in the front yard setbacks. All of them. Every single one of them. And so, now, when we get into the specifics of this particular project, we can then we can lean on things like special land use things and so on, special processes. But I would argue that as a community, you want to think long and hard. There are people who will not go down that route. Candace is happy to continue. But other people, and I know this in spades from working in many communities, when I explain to them what the process is, when I read through it, and I say, you have to push against this code a little bit like I'm talking, they say, nah, I won't do it. And how many people in your community will make that decision and let their barn fall down? I don't know. But if you don't think about that, because some of the requirements, if it's a special use, are actually work for you and work for her as the owner. And it would be great if, for example, there was a way to do this by right, so that people could know what they're allowed to do with their barn and not have it be an elaborate process, which carries a cost. Carries a cost of time, carries a cost of agita because you don't know if you're going to get passed, and it carries a cost of money. So from that perspective, I think that we could, I would like to talk about the report, but I think that's kind of an important thing for me to put out there as sort of ground rules.
All right. Well, thank you. I think we want to,
Thank you.
I think next we want to get to, Zach, do you want to walk us through your review?
Yep, so first my apologies to the applicants and the folks. When I first got it, it wasn't clear to me that it was supposed to be reviewed as a public or private recreational area or facility. I went with the agribusiness because that seemed the most consistent fit, but this fits a lot better, so my apologies for any heart attack or
He
sleepless
got the
nights.
run of it.
Okay.
Plus, that the zoning was wrong. The
Yep,
zoning was listed as
yep, that
They
was-
affected a lot.
FR, not RE, and that also affected a range
Yep,
of
yep, and I
issues.
was able to get it.
What is the current zoning?
The zoning is RE.
RE.
It was
Okay.
listed in the first report as
Oh,
FR.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
And
Just
those
looking
are,
at REs on
yes,
Right.
and so I believe it's May 27th is the report you all should be.
Yep.
Yeah, it's the
should
final.
have.
So, and I also want to say I'm not anti-barn. I grew up in a rural community that still has an operating grain elevator 2 blocks from my house, and we get the little corn bits coming down when the tractors come in from the fields. Very disappointing because as a kid you think it's snowing and it's just the little bits of corn coming down. So again, for planning commission, members of the public and the applicants, because this came to me as a preliminary and final site plan, it's may feel more aggressive or more intense on the things that's requesting than if it were, for example, just a preliminary site plan, where it's a bit more fuzzy and you guys have a chance then to say, for example, Zach, we don't care about the soil map or the topo, we know what's going on. But because came to me as preliminary and final, it's very nitty-gritty and detailed on there.
Which I'm not bothered by it. It was just that I wanted to just be on the same page.
Yep. So for those of you in the audience, this is being proposed as a what's the fancy term here? A public or private recreational area or facility. That's a special land use in the zoning district. As alluded to earlier, there was a subcommittee meeting that determined that this use was consistent with that, and I think it was October 8th, 2020, and was consistent with a previously approved similar facility somewhere in the community. So that's how we got there. Special land uses, for those in the audience who may not be familiar, are uses which you can do, but because of the potential negative impacts, they require a little more scrutiny, and the approving bodies can put more conditions on them to manage any potential negative impacts on there. Okay, so we'll jump in there. The property is located on a corner lot, and I see you've got it up there. 2 paved roads. No?
No.
Just one?
Cedric.
Not really even.
Barely paved? Okay.
Two dirt roads, really.
2 dirt roads and then the 2
It's
going away are
paved to the
paved.
corner.
Okay.
The intersection's paved.
Paved adjacent.
Right, is that right?
Yeah, the proposed access point of the drive is where actually the cutoff of the pavement and the dirt begins on Center.
Oh, it
West-
does
west of
go
Lincoln.
down Center.
Yeah,
Okay.
it does go down quite a bit on
Okay.
the property
Okay.
off the Center.
That's what I didn't realize. All right, thank you.
Good to know I wasn't completely imagining that. And that's actually quite important because these facilities can kind of have a pulse traffic. And so if it's on paved roads or mostly paved roads, that's quite beneficial compared to gravel roads, the impact. So you can see the existing barn in there. The little hatched area is the proposed area with the barn and the parking, proposed parking. The surrounding properties are a mix of farming, residential, and rural estate. Some mixes of single-family houses on pretty large lots and existing agricultural fields. It is currently within the RE Rural Estate District. That was the thing that was alluded to, that I had a brain fart in the original report and put it in FR. For future land use map, I do like to look forward to see what's going on. So this property and adjacent properties to the east, the south, and the west are in the low-density single-family. To the north, it's medium-density single-family, and across the street is high-density attached housing. And so it's not necessarily hyper important, but when you think about landscaping and buffering and the layout of the site, kind of keep in mind what might be there in the future. I jumped forward a whole bunch of pages here. As far as the site, it's relatively flat. There's not a lot of challenging topography. There are no wetlands on there. There are trees, but no significant woodlands. The soils, according to the USDA National Resource Conservation Service, are Hillsdale Miami loams, which are generally compatible with these types of developments. So the couple of things we noted for, and this is primarily because of the final site plan element that was requested, is topographic map and soil map. Those are things that are kind of hardwired in the zoning ordinance that say these shall be on final site plans. This body, though, does have the opportunity to waive that requirement if it's not necessary for reviewing the project. As far as area width, height, and setbacks, the property is larger than what's required in the zoning district. It's wider than what's required. As alluded to, the barn is within the required front yard setback. However, I would bet money that that barn was there before there was zoning in the world, which would qualify as a legally non-conforming structure, so it can continue to exist. And so even though that doesn't meet the setbacks, it's not prohibitive for this use.
If I may, real quick, for what it's worth, while we don't know it is that barn, we know that the 1915 map that is on your website shows the barn on it, which is actually kind of rare. Normally barns are not on those maps, only the houses and the mills and the important buildings. But it was either this barn or the previous barn, which was located on the same site and apparently had burned at some point.
Yeah, my research, the original barn did have some burning damage, so at least part of the barn has been replaced since 1950.
Is this the one where, as I read in our historical book, that
Yes.
they bought with gold money from California or something?
Yeah.
Okay.
You actually feature a picture of this barn too in your website.
It's on your website, yeah. Which is also when, you know, I was looking for property to, you know, live forever and grow a family with this big idea of, you know, community connections and everything, is, you know, with the research and everything, is partly why myself and my husband bought the property in this town.
Proceed.
Yep. So as mentioned, the barn is existing legal non-conforming. There are some developmental standards that aren't on the plan as far as dimension setbacks, lot coverage, and again, because this was reviewed against final site plan, we kind of got precise on that. One thing I will note though, while we have developmental standards, there's a section in your parking, your off-street parking, that says you can't have parking in yards. That was a very unfortunate use of words. It would have been much better if they'd said required yards, but just by calling it a yard, everything's a yard, right? It's some kind of yard. So my understanding is that it was meant to say, if it's a required setback, you can't put off-street parking there. We'll get to that in a little bit later. As far as access and circulation, it will have a new driveway on the northern side. I believe the existing field drive will probably be closed, yes? Yeah, that's okay. One thing that I did want to bring up is circulation on the site, is if there are going to be buses or limousines or garbage trucks, the big garbage trucks on there, it's important to make sure that they can access around the site. So typical tools are just showing turning radiuses for those on there. There are accessible parking spaces proposed next to the barn. So the couple of notes for circulation is it'll need to get permission for the road commission for the drive. We want to make sure that the larger vehicles that may use the site are able to maneuver it without hitting the parked cars. And for the accessible spaces, we throw out the idea of paving them or doing a hard surface so that folks in wheelchairs or whatever don't have to worry about uneven surfaces. Not required, but we're throwing out there. For off-street parking and loading, for parking surfaces in RE districts, it's possible to have it gravel. That's the proposal here. It is more consistent with the rural environment and it helps with stormwater management. They have noted that if there's dust, they're going to treat it. The couple of things that we'll bring back that I want to bring up is the location within the required front yard. Either it'll have to be brought back or variances secured for that. there was a little math error as I counted up the number of spaces. There was one less space than what it called out for. That's usually a ghost when plans are revised, so that would just need to be corrected. The proposed spaces, and I'm gonna say, I need to say something really good here so you don't think I'm just awful mean guy, is the proposal for bumper blocks seems really silly, but it's very important when you have a gravel parking lot so folks know where they're supposed to park. Otherwise, your 9.5-foot wide spaces become 12-foot wide spaces, and all of a sudden you've lost half your capacity. So that's actually a very important detail there. But the dimensions, as mentioned there, aren't quite the size that you guys require. It says 9 by 18, and you guys require an extra 6 inches for the width there.
It's drawn correctly. That was a notational error.
Okay,
They are
Probably
not,
rounding
they
or
are all
something.
drawn correctly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
excellent.
So just
along with like the radius and the turn point for all the larger vehicles too. We already have that addressed for the site plan.
Okay.
we'll pick up the information.
Yep.
So for off-street parking, just the location, we mentioned that. They just mentioned that they are sized properly, they're just not noted on there, so that's something that would be added to the site plan when it gets to review. Mentioned the number of parking spaces. The method they use for calculating capacity is consistent with similar uses, so we believe that's appropriate. And dimensioning the plan, the spaces and the maneuvering lanes. For essential services, it's our understanding it will be served by on-site well and septic. Again, because it's final site plan, we would like to have an idea of where those are going to be, because an on-site septic system for this is going to take up a bit of space. You can attest to it. And so we want to make sure that that's not going to interfere with parking or other types of things. And also make sure it has enough separation distance from wells. Separation distances for wells serving public facilities tend to be a bit more rigorously looked at than private. So there are a couple of essential services that aren't on the plans, or at least aren't on the plans that we saw that should be added on there. For landscaping and screening, the site plan we had didn't show any. There should be some associated with the parking and some along the streets. It is possible to grant a waiver, but we need to know what the required would be to figure out what the waiver from that is. And personally, I would say this type of a facility, it would make more sense to have a tree row than a bunch of shrubs. Shrubs are very suburban and maybe look nice in that facility, but traditional farms would have a row of maple trees or something like that. So something like that would probably be far more consistent than all the little shrubs in there. For lighting, it is mentioned that there will be lighting on the architectural drawings, but the final site plan needs to have the location and details about the fixtures and how bright they are, so those should be added. If there's going to be any outdoor advertising or signs, it should be added to the plan. And again, these are because it was came up as a final site plan. For private and public recreational areas and facilities, there are specific standards in section 22F. Needs to have a description of the use, the proposed use, whether it's going to require memberships, whether it's going to be permanent or year-round, seasonal, the intended hours of operation, the number of employees, bylaws, nuisance mitigation, and other applicable information. My understanding from the materials that were submitted is that it isn't going to require membership like a club or something like that. They have proposed seasonal operation from March through October with hours from 11 until 11 on Friday and Saturdays and 8:30 p.m. on other days. There is a little difference with the noise that part of the narrative says it might go to 11:30, so that would require a little bit of touching up. It mentions the number of staff members. One thing for both the applicant and the planning commission to be aware of is as part of the site plan review, if they say March to October, that's when it can operate. So if there's any interest for the applicants and having Christmas parties or other stuff or New Year's parties, you need to include that as part of the application, because site special land uses, what you ask for is kind of what gets bound, and if you want to change it, it requires a trip to amend it. So think about that.
We're going through that with another property too, so he's,
They did mention treatment for dust. And also, one thing I mentioned on there, it seems a very little detail, maybe not necessarily part of the site plan or special land use, but as far as operation, if the folks running the facility are the ones who actually sign the contract with the music or the DJs, you can tell them to stop, or you can tell them to turn it down, whereas if you're working for the wedding party, they respond to whatever the wedding party tells them. Again, not necessarily part of the site plan, but definitely something that can be very useful.
To that point, and this is an important consideration, I've heard this come up in numerous discussions of other event spaces. Candace and her family live on site.
yeah.
That's huge.
Yep.
So then next, compatibility of use. As mentioned, Planning Commission Subcommittee did an informal review previously and determined that this was compatible. They are going to have attendants on site to assist with parking. Food waste is going to be removed promptly. We mentioned potential for screening to mitigate the impact on the road in future development and existing uses. Based on the previous review, it was determined that this would be a special land use review, which is what we're doing here today. Traffic impacts and road access. As we just discussed, it is going to have the driveway right where the road ends, or where the paved road ends. We're not aware of any specific traffic issues. I will note that these types of facilities tend to be more pulsy than like if you had a restaurant with a similar capacity where folks all arrive at once and all leave at once. Sometimes it can be good, sometimes it can be bad. It depends when the events are and what the other traffic patterns are there. We mentioned landscaping before. Again, there is opportunity for waiver, which the applicants can ask for. For setbacks, we mentioned that the existing barn is legally non-conforming. It can continue to exist and be used. The parking lot and the dumpster are within the required yards. In fact, for dumpsters, it says it needs to be in rear yards. A couple of structures that were alluded to in narratives but weren't included in the site plan are potential tent on the site. That should be also shown, or at least an area where a tent could pop up, and potential restroom facility. If those are intended to go on there, they should also be shown, or at least where they might be. Parking, as we mentioned, the number of parking spaces seems consistent with similar uses. It's based on the number of seats and the number of staff. There are use-specific standards for certain uses that aren't addressed here. And the applicant will have to do an annual review unless the zoning administrator determines a different review window is appropriate. There is a potential, it's not included in here because there are some details that needed to be discussed of, I want to use the exact, for developmental standards for public-private recreation area and facilities, it is possible to do deviations from the standards for those facilities. If substantial justice is served, if it's the minimum deviation required, if there are extraordinary circumstances, and if there's no safety hazard or nuisance. That was included in that section of the zoning ordinance because basically it's a lot of different uses that could be public-private recreational area facilities. And so there's recognition that it may be difficult to develop standards that work right for all of those. So keep in mind any of the specific standards we just went through for this type of a special land use facility, there's potential for deviations, which could potentially include parking lot outside of the variance process.
So that would be a variance that would be like approved within the site plan approval, not like the ZBA.
Yes, you essentially,
It's not unlike the PUD in that we approve a package. that,
Yep,
you
yep.
know,
Or it's kind of old school performance-based zoning where if it's doing the things that you want it to do in a different way, that you have the opportunity to do it. So it is, I don't want to call it a variance, but it's a cousin of a variance that's hardwired in for the specific standards for public-private recreation area facilities. So as we mentioned, for the site plan, there's a number of details that need to be added. If it were a preliminary site plan, it would probably be very, very close, but because it came through as both preliminary and final, there's a lot of details. For special land use standards, it's generally consistent with the area and mentioned supporting the open spaces and agriculture, so it's consistent with that. And because of the outstanding stuff, we do recommend a postponement. If there are areas that this body feels comfortable with doing waivers for, it would be good to give the applicants direction on that. You don't necessarily have to say, we're gonna grant you a waiver for this, but be good to give them direction. And that's what we've got.
Thank you, Zach. So what on that is giving you particular heartburn?
Well, I was gonna actually ask you this,
The
the more
part-
the specific.
And it's not, it doesn't really give us so much heartburn, is it? So again, it goes back to that concept of the zoning code and many of the detail requirements work just fine in suburbia and the urban world. And in the 21st century, I would add. Now, just in case anybody heard anything I said earlier as being maybe a little bit negative or critical of the township, I'll be critical of my profession. In the 21st century, we have all of these screening requirements, not just for parking lots, but also for certain development types, because architects build ugly buildings, and we don't want to look at them. And that is true. And so, in this case, we have a building that's beautiful and very close to the road, and when we considered, for example, the parking area, we actually did start drawing the parking area out in the field. And it started to become like a suburban shopping mall, if you will. You park over here, you take the long walk over there. And then we started looking at it in terms of the already fenced-off working areas for the barn. A barn is commonly seen with work areas that are flat around the barn. In this case, if it were gravel, it's basically, it's monotone color. It doesn't appear to be for cars unless there are cars there. So for the however many hours of a week that there are no cars there, it looks right, which is a goal. And for the time that it's parked, well, then it's being used. We have no aversion to screening, but that some of the prescriptions for screening and landscape screening and fencing are knee-jerk suburbia that start to make the barn look really weird. And because Zach, it's perfect because Zach is here and you can talk to him in private. One of the things we did at Cordovan Farms is we very purposefully, we had the same problem with landscape. We were supposed to provide a certain amount of landscape screening because it's now a commercial venture. And we argued successfully, thankfully, that we wanted you to see the barn. We didn't want to cover it up with landscaping. We wanted you to see it. It's a farm. It was a working farm, and there was big working gardens in front of the barn. We wanted you to see it. So we instead planted the landscaping in other places. We're not averse to you planting the landscaping, but we didn't want to put it where it didn't make sense for the context of that building, not for just any other suburban shopping mall. So yes, the parking is in the setbacks. From the point of view of where would I want to see a big patch of gravel, that one makes the most amount of sense for me when the cars aren't there than having an acre worth of gravel parking lot over off to the side in the middle of what should be a cultivated field. So that was kind of the thinking. And I do think that we can fence the corner a little bit to keep the headlights out of the neighbors. But I would like to ask that you consider that. And of course, to reiterate what Zach said, but also put a finer point on it. It also can't be a variance because there's no hardship that I can't honestly come before you and say, this is a hardship, I have to put the parking here.
We can't put it there because we can't
I'm
do
not,
business
I don't
there.
do that, I don't play that argument game, that's a specious way of approaching this. The reality is, we want to do it because it's aesthetically the most sensitive thing for this barn in this location on that rather public corner. I mean, for its rural section, it's,
Yeah, it's pretty well.
What is
covered.
what is the proposed setback for the parking lot?
the dimensional
Yeah.
I don't have it in my head, I think it's 40.
What is required? Well, it can't be, it's gotta be the backyard, right? That's what's
Right,
required.
it's gotta be in the back, yes, I mean, again, there's a predictability to the requirements of putting certain things in the backyard. In this case, we kinda don't have a backyard.
Yeah, so the issue here is that you can't have parking where you have parking.
Well, and I will say
Right.
though, that, the proposed access off the center was, I actually had the road commissioner come out and do a review and everything, because we were initially, when we did the preliminary, meeting, I had it more east. There's already an existing
Okay, yeah.
entrance
I seem to
curve.
recall
Yeah,
that,
see, yeah, there's already existing, and from that approach, the pitch of the road, you couldn't see the traffic, so that's why we moved it, I think it was like 40 yards west of the one that already exists. And that was based on the road commission's finding.
It's a higher point, and you can see,
Correct,
Better
yeah.
sight distance. And
Yeah.
you can't see down to the west. It drops off, and someone coming up over that hill to the existing one,
Oh, gotcha.
if they're going too fast, you'd never see them. And if it's a bus that's pulling out more slowly, not good.
Bad news.
I think what he says about the parking lot's logical, if there's a way for us to, you know, unless someone else, you know, to me, it makes sense, we believe the field. Usually around the barn is the barnyard. I try to tell my wife this at home, where if I have junk piled behind the barn, it's because it's the barnyard, it's not the yard, it's not the lawn, you know. I'm losing that battle at home, but,
And
you know, to me, it seems logical, but I don't know what. A lot of times it seems like our rules are written a certain way, and then logic sort of escapes it, and then we all sit here trying to figure out how to get around it, and it's like, that's frustrating, but I'm open to.
Well, that's what we're here for, is to.
Right, sure.
Make that.
In this case, the relief valve is hardwired in. So that's very nice that it has that deviation element.
Meaning that we can approve their special land use
Mhm.
plan with the parking in a non-conforming configuration, and that takes care of everything.
Charles, what would you propose for the screening?
At this point, my thinking would be some kind of fencing. I understand the concept of the trees. Unfortunately, what would really look nice around that barn is, 36-inch diameter trunks. But they are,
40-year-old trees.
they're hard to transplant that big. So I think it would be a combination of trees for the future, but not this sort of suburban development where you plant these little tiny trees really, really close together on a berm or something where it just, and then they sort of grow so they're solid,
Yeah.
evergreens and the like. I would like to plant trees that 50 years from now will be mature and mark that corner very nicely, and in the shorter term use fencing.
Like wood slat fence,
So,
high enough to
something like
block
that.
headlights.
I think we could come up with something that might look like it's sympathetic with the barn itself.
yeah, something that will blend, but meet, the expectations of you as well. A berm really is just like, it's an eyesore, so my closest neighbor in the northeast corner, he's gonna be staring at this, like.
And I'm more than happy to work with all of you. I think, though, if I recall correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, the zoning code calls for 6 to 8 foot high fences, which I think would start to look like a little bit of a compound if we were to do that. And I don't think my goal would be to cut the headlights down. That's the big obnoxious part, is to be able to take that headlight and knock it down, because the pulsing is the expression I think Zach used for the traffic, when, you know, yes, it all kind of comes and goes in a relatively small period of time, and when an event is ended, you have an array of cars and vehicles leaving with their headlights, and it's sort of this constant little thing for a half an hour. That's what I'd like to knock down, which I think would help, you know, the neighbors, which really don't exist right now, to be honest.
Across the street,
Just the one diagonal
Just the one.
corner.
oh,
The one that's directly north of center, that is a single resident owner, and he does corn crops. And his house is actually even more northwest of that whole entire field, yeah. He drives in his tractor
so
every day.
that's not
An issue, I mean, for
So
at
kind of
least a long time coming anyway.
screening this corner up here and, you know,
Yes.
along here, that's sort of,
Mhm.
be nice to keep the view of the barn
Yeah,
open.
that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, it is relatively tall structure, so we're not gonna.
Not gonna be able to hide it.
not
Well,
gonna do-
no, but I, you know, it's a nice looking barn, so.
Mhm.
Charles, I'm a little confused on, you talk about the nice view of the barn in the front, but then like right in that corner is the dumpster. Like, is that the
You
best?
won't see it.
Because you're gonna screen it.
Well, that is the service side of the building. It already exists
Okay.
that way. And given certain interior constraints in this, you know, now we get into the interior architecture, the way the rooms and the structure of the barn and the doors and everything else, without trying to not fight the barn, the gatherings want to be on the south side of the barn. They just do. It's the bigger side, given where the overhead doors are, et cetera. So the first floor on the north side of the barn becomes service and storage. And it kind of isn't, I mean, I'd have to, like, pick the barn up and turn it around, which is doable, but comes with cost. In order to, you know, but that, I mean, the barn wants that side as the service entrance. That's the way it's built.
Mm-hmm.
Again, so that's that funny thing of when they built this barn, they weren't thinking about your suburban zoning board or anybody, you know, you know, that's where they came and went with their service stuff. That's the only, yeah, that's how they did it.
I think we're gonna do good.
So from my perspective, I accept all of these things as design challenges to try to balance them out as best as possible.
I would ask, like, what specifics give you heartburn? Is there any concerns that Zach brought up that you would want me to address or that you're stern on? Or, like you said, you know, suggested that there's some things that we could consider a waiver. I mean, I know that this was, you know, preliminary, but final. Obviously, a postponement, I came into this meeting expecting. But really, if you could just narrow down our focus on your expectations would be great.
Okay,
I like it.
I mean, I like the plan, honestly, I don't really have any, personally, I don't have any issues with it, yeah. Zach, can you give us some can you give her some feedback based on that?
Well, first I'll say that the screening for off-street parking for commercial uses in residential areas is 5 feet high evergreens. So
The last thing you see around the barn.
yes, yes. So there are a number of things for site plan, like signs need to be shown where, if there's gonna be a sign, I suspect there's gonna be a sign.
There's an existing sign we're gonna,
There's a lot, if we wanted to get into it, that we,
Of
with your
detail.
report, that will already been addressed or will be
Yep.
like.
So there are a couple of those things that need to be on there that aren't on there. A couple of things, again, for your discussion, the big thing is the parking in that area is gonna require approval of a deviation. And again, your criteria are substantial justice, that the proposed deviations will provide substantial justice to the applicant as well as to other property owners in the vicinity. Resulting development will relate harmoniously with adjacent land uses and will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. Minimum deviation required, that the requested deviation will be the minimum required to provide substantial justice and allow granting of the deviation in such fashion that the spirit of these regulations will be supported and public safety and welfare secured. Extraordinary circumstances, there are conditions applicable to the use or property involved that do not apply generally to other properties and uses in the area. The circumstances shall not be self-created by the owner or former owner of the land. Described circumstances or conditions shall uniquely identify this request. No safety hazard or nuisance. The deviation will not increase the hazard of fire or otherwise endanger public safety or create a public nuisance.
I mean, I think we can get there with all of that. I think we can approve this sort of as designed and satisfy.
I would say in the public interest, I would put it to the applicants to kind of, not necessarily a deep essay narrative, but say, here's how we think we meet these, just a sentence or two. And there are a couple of things that they have mentioned, screening headlights. So you don't necessarily need to have a 5-foot high evergreen screen to block headlights. There are lots of different tools that can be used for that.
Probably a fence would be the most
Yeah.
sensible, and a 6 or 8 foot tall fence would look ridiculous there. So personally, I would be open to.
Yeah, I think just put something together, how you meet those criteria,
Yeah,
what the plan is.
yeah, I think so.
I think
So what I've
verbally discussed sounds fine.
What I've heard is the planning commission isn't too stressed out with the plan, with some more details added in.
Yep, I would satisfy, all the detailed requirements that Zach is laying out in here, in terms of additional information. The site is flat, right? Pretty
Yeah.
much.
Yes.
Do
When you
we-
get more
we
west, like that's why he did the approach on a curved angle, like that starts to get hilly. And that's why we kind of wanted to consolidate and keep everything to the northeast corner as well.
And it rises a little to the south once you get to the house.
Oh, I'm getting it, there's a
Waive the
requirement,
topo
waive the topo map. I don't
Yeah,
think we need it.
I'm okay with
And the
that.
soil too, right?
Yeah, as long as there's anything proposed structurally that, that's what you're designing, so I have no concerns with the soils or the topo. It's right down the street.
Yeah,
I don't
we're
wanna
not
drive out
putting-
there, I'll,
We're not putting a on there, a structure on there that's gonna settle or anything like that.
One thing I didn't see in there, though, was anything about fire suppression.
That is something that we have started a conversation with the fire department. We have, what we haven't done is sat down now, we figured out some sympathetic egress patterns. And the reality is it gets a little complicated, but A1 use needs fire suppression at 300 people, A2 use needs fire suppression at 100 people, and A3 use needs fire suppression back at 300 people. Why is A2 100? That's a good question. This building at a few thousand square feet gets hit with the same anvil that a banquet hall of 150,000 square feet gets hit, but they don't compare. No matter which way you turn in these buildings, there's egress.
You know, one thing I know about old barns is once a fire gets started,
Absolutely true.
they burn quickly.
Correct. And you're speaking to the son of a fireman. And I've also become a student of these issues. There are 2 known barn fires of event barns in the entire country that I know of. One in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and was started by the caterers. Took me 2 years to find that out. The other one was in Tyrone Township, which is right next to Ann Arbor. That one, I knew the barn exactly. I was there the day it burned when I heard what was going on. The thing is 2 miles from the firehouse and was so inflamed by the time they got there, they could do nothing but protect the other buildings. I'm very well aware. We will be, which is a building code issue, not a zoning issue, but we will be, the reason they burn is not just because it's old wood, it's because there's so much oxygen. That's the reason. So we're gonna be sealing this building up so that that airflow is not the same concern as the one inside Township, which was just a gappy room, but they were using it for assembly among other things. And it was very, it was very lucky that nobody got hurt.
Because that's one concern that we had a fire in our subdivision, and a mile and a half from the fire department, and they got out there in time to basically roast marshmallows. I mean, there was nothing left of the home.
Right.
I think the other thought I had during the preliminary meeting that we had was just like the structural inspection of the barn, but that's something that, like, to get the, you're doing a review of that, so they need that anyway for the occupancy, right?
Right.
I did have
Building
the,
department, or the county,
Yeah.
county.
yeah, the fire inspector came out with like, last year, at the end of last year, and then we kind of went through, you know, the whole barn, and then we addressed some things. You know, if this happens with the A1, A2, or, you know, in certain like suppression systems, dry systems to encase, not full active, because also in consideration of the operation months too. I don't intend to do it in the winter months, so you're not gonna have like the running water and everything that you would need for, worry about freezing pipes and et cetera, so. I mean, one thing leads into another.
Yeah, the other thing I want to emphasize is the use statement, because as Zach mentioned, if you don't put the stuff in here, you're gonna be back in here a year and a half from now wanting to expand on something if you leave it out. So-
Wanting to do Christmas parties.
Yeah, so, you know,
Stuff like
please be sure for your own good that you have everything covered in here that you plan to do or you think you might do in the next 5 years, let's say.
I think it might be worth it to say our main objective is to do March through October or whatever, with the possibility of doing like, you know, unless you're just positive that's what I would do.
But we also have to talk through the logistics of, if you are doing it at Christmas, now you're paving, you're plowing the snow.
Right.
To be prepared for it, et cetera, so it's not a simple matter of just wanting to
Just
do
doing
it.
it, yeah.
You then pay the price for it.
Heating.
And what does it mean to
Everything,
take care of your clients?
Yeah.
Yeah. Then you have new fire
We can't put in
suppression
those
deals
like
too.
convertible heaters, you know?
No.
In the special,
Just a
in the use statement, I think it, maybe you mentioned this, Zach, but it talked about 11 PM shutdown, but then somewhere else it said,
11:30 for the
11:30, you
So,
might
yeah.
have mentioned it.
So the
Yeah.
flex of, you know, the 30-minute extra, you know, overhead of the noise.
Okay.
You'd have to get permit if you're having a noisy party after they can't, right?
Well, we
There would
don't,
be
we
a
don't
lot.
necessarily have that
Yeah, but you
here.
got any option?
This would be the document that binds it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so whatever the shut off would,
We just have to
Yeah.
see where it overlaps with the noise ordinance.
okay,
Whatever is approved is when the clock strikes 12. That's,
okay.
From practical matter, again, not zoning ordinance, but my experience has been to make friends with your neighbors, let them know when you're holding events, make it available on the days when you're not, that will make people a lot happier with noise and sounds and traffic. Just like when you're in college, make sure you invite your people next door to the party.
Right.
Makes it easier.
Oh, and then septic and water, show those on
Yeah.
your plan.
We have some homework to still do on this.
Mhm. Yeah, that's it. And whether, are you gonna have underground septic, or are you gonna do porta potties or something, or what?
We keep going back and forth. I'm more leaning towards not a septic field because of the space, the money, everything. So we're, you know, like at the preliminary one, I had, you know, addressed the portable trailers, whether it's gonna be a stationary or comes in each event. But then we're discussing actually monopolizing some of the space in the barn and doing stationary, fake, faux porta johns that, you know, have the service come in and clean them.
Clean them out, okay.
Yeah, so bearing, whether we, you know, bearing,
There's some different options out there.
Yeah, so
we'll
we're-
just wanna, we'll just wanna get that addressed in
okay.
your plans.
Yeah.
Anything else before we send them on their way?
Well, it looks like there might be some questions or something.
Yeah. Well, yeah. you guys have any other questions for us?
I don't think so, I think we addressed everything.
Okay. Scott?
I'm a little disappointed because I've seen two issues here today, and it just seems like everybody wants a rubber stamp it. We don't, nobody on this board, it seems that we're care about the community. I live right down the road from your farm, and they had the weddings. They had, you had your time, please let me talk. I'm not trying to be rude, look, ladies only gave me so much time. Okay. I got the blaring music down the road a half a mile. You can hear 200 people. If you see what she's proposing, you guys read it all, up to 200 people every day. Weekends up to 11:30 at night. You want to let her cross your map? No, you don't. All the traffic. Okay, I go drive by that farm every day. My dad lives on Green Road. It's a beautiful barn. To come in here and act like you didn't buy the property to restore the barn, you bought the property, you said it. To her business. But anyways, let's get on. Okay, the barn's beautiful. Okay, we know that. Lions used to own it, as I've lived out here most of my life. Okay, the community comes first. We zoned it. We've had public hearings. People want an area to raise their children, peace and tranquility. You got houses going up right down the street, right around the corner from her. You got foundations getting put in. Those people are gonna find out, and they're not gonna be happy. You're gonna spend 2, 3, you got houses worth 300,000, 400,000, paying taxes like that, and having 200 people in and out of there every day? I mean, I'm sorry. In agribusiness, you're stretching it. There's no farming going on there. Believe me, there's no farming going on there. I drive by it, just weeds. Okay? I'm not, like I'm saying, community comes first. We already went through this with the asphalt plant, and we haven't got an answer yet with the in writing. I hope you can address that today. But those people are going to be concerned, and I'm sure the ones across the street and up and down within a half a mile are going to be concerned. Because let me tell you something, you're going to hear it. You're going to hear it, and I heard it when we shut the herb farm down to 8 o'clock at night. But they were already existing farm. They had a greenhouse, they were doing herbs. They just went to the farming group and put in the outside weddings. So at least we got them busted down to 8 o'clock at night. Weddings, no alcohol. I haven't heard anything about alcohol. But she's talking about 190-something people in there, events. And that's a lot. My wife, I'm not anti-business. We got guys in business with 2 or 3 people coming out up to 20. My wife had a house on Harlem Road. She had an in shop, beauty shop. You know what the township told us? No more than 2 cars. Then I had to go to every damn neighbor around and have a sign of paper that this township, that it was okay with them. We need to care about the neighbors around her. She moved out here 2 years ago. Those people were there first. And so I'm coming with intentions to have a quiet neighborhood. I'm not against her, but I understand she wants to make money, and I'm gonna tell you something right now. You do that 200 people a day, up to 200 people a day, and that thing gets rolling, I doubt she's gonna be living there much longer. She's gonna take her little profits and go buy a house down the street. I got a girl across the street from my house. They just bought the house across my street, and I'm hands tied, I'm working with Ross, the state's running, so I got no choice. And I think you know what I'm talking about. The alcohol and drug center over there. Right across the street from my house. I have no say. But the people should have a say. I'm sure when her neighbors find out, they're not going to be happy. Especially the ones nearby.
Yeah, we'll have public hearings, of course.
Yeah, and let's not confuse this with restoring a barn. This isn't the issue. It isn't a barn restoring. I'm sorry. That shouldn't even been brought up. This should have been stopped. This is for a business in the barn.
Thank you, Scott. Yes, Sarah.
So, I'll be brief. I just want to say to Candace and Chuck, my name is Sarah. We just started a nonprofit in the area called Residents for Community Preservation, and there are a couple of little tiny things I picked out that you mentioned tonight that I just wanted to reiterate to the Planning Commission. So, one thing Chuck said is think about what we want for the future of the community, and that ties in so well with what we've been talking to you all about with moving and preserving the historic townhouse. We've also been talking about community-based spaces for people to gather, historic preservation, to promote and protect our community's history. And there's one really important thing that Chuck brought up tonight about the ordinances and protecting old barns and maybe reconsidering that. Something that's been on our radar and going forward is talking about establishing some kind of ordinance to protect our historic buildings in our community in general. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know if that's something that can happen down the road. It's just that we haven't even gotten into the project planning process much, but we have talked about an ordinance down the road to help prevent us from being in this situation again in the future. So, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Anything else for the Solomonsons? So you guys are set with what we've discussed and sort of adding the information that we've asked for and bringing it back to us?
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I guess next on our agenda is the call to the public. We have some public here. Anybody else want to say anything about anything planning commission related? Anything at all?
I just want to, go ahead, Sarah.
No feedback on the R2 rezone, or I'm sorry.
Nothing yet, no. On the asphalt plant, we haven't heard anything or anything.
I figured you'd say something.
Yeah, I mean, we're, nothing.
Okay.
No, they haven't pulled their application, and like we've said a million times, they have a right to petition, so.
Oh, yeah, I know.
As you know.
We're just curious about if they've
Don,
taken.
I just want to say, I am me. Don't take me wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I've lived down, my family's been here since the 50s. Somebody comes out here 2 years, and your intentions are to make a business, I understand that. But the most thing is, nobody ever takes into consideration the landowners, okay, I've been down to these township meetings a million times. They say, okay, we'll let you do this, but what's the property owners around, what's their rights? They bought that house with property, raised, like we said, the asphalt plant. Why do we have the zoning? Perry, I sit there and listen to you tonight, oh yeah, we can tweak this, we can change. No, we have a master plan. We have everything all set up. Get the master plan changed, fine. Let's go by the master plan. These are the rules we set up. This is what the community wanted. We've talked about this, the master plan. This is what people want for our community. We're not asking for much. We want it fair for everybody. But to give her, you say, well, we're gonna make it happen. Well, yeah. Who's gonna make it happen for those properties that are around there? If one person disagrees, the guy across the street, isn't his right to say, no, he's against it? One against one?
And like we've said, anybody can petition us.
I understand that, but I mean, I've seen other cases go through, they give it to them. And the property owners right next door don't have a case. Well, that's okay, we're gonna do it anyway. That's not right. And the gentleman's lived there his whole life and raised his whole family. And they come around and plop this crap in there. I mean, come on. Whose right supersedes the other?
Well, as you know, it all goes into the
But this is
decision.
why-
It all factors.
But you understand where I'm coming from.
I do.
I mean, everybody has rights. My right to do something shouldn't interfere with my neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
It should, it's just peace and tranquility is just as important as ever. That's why I came out here. We moved out here in '67, my grandfather was already here in the '50s. It's a lot of changes since then, and it just seems like they keep coming out, and keep coming out, and keep coming out, and they just want to, we don't want it to be city. I mean, I know it's gonna change so much, but everybody's already said, we want to keep this as rural as we can, just like the subdivision over here. Don't jam pack this subdivision full. First of all, that White Lake Road is so dangerous down through there. Go drive down through, so go pull out some of the driveways. Mine's got a curb on it. When I pull out, I gotta back up real quick so somebody can get me. Okay? And the speed limit does have to be changed. It needs to be 35. I got gravel trains coming in, it's not supposed to. There's no way they can stop at 45. I'll let you guys go. Good
All
night.
right, thanks, Scott. Anybody else? Over here? Yes.
I have a quick question. I'm not sure if this was addressed or not, but with the barn and stuff, I know that corner, I know that house, but I can't visualize right now. How close is the closest house to that? I feel like it's pretty rural right there.
Probably either the northeast corner, or if you go south and across the road,
I mean,
or
there
next
aren't
door.
that many neighbors.
There's, I would say 3 to 5 houses that are within Close.
And that's a truck route too, like I see semi trucks
That's
turning
good.
around there, like they miss Woody's and get
Oh,
their legs and turn around right when it turns to dirt.
And it's different than maybe
It's
have a
a
party.
busy road, it's a
It's
busy
different than a
road
party account.
already.
You got a party going at night, it's a whole different thing, because all the people's voices, they go a long ways.
Thank you.
I was just wondering.
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head. I think there's a wetland right across the street, right across Linden Road.
There's cornfield on the other side.
A big wetland, cornfield, and then the kitty corner, you're right, there's houses, and then houses south maybe.
Yeah, I live just down the road.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a pretty rural corner.
Yes, sir.
Neighbors have a right.
Mike, just a question, do we have any master planning workshops coming up, or is that something that's going to be happening in the near future?
In the near future, we haven't scheduled anything yet, no.
Okay, so just keep looking on the
Keep
website?
an eye out for the emails, for the website,
Okay,
and then, when we do have workshops and stuff like that, we'll do the best we can to notify the public. But
Okay.
the website is always the best place to look,
gotcha, thank you.
if you can handle that, so, yep. Okay. All right, well, thank you.
Thanks.
Next workshop meeting is next Wednesday.
Thanks for opening it up for us, guys.
Thank you,
Yep.
Scott.
Next Wednesday. What do you want to talk about, Ross?
So, I mean, I'm thinking based on the conversation at the joint meeting, accessory structures.
Accessory structures.
Yeah, I think that's,
I still need to give you information on the signs. We do have, a lot of things coming down the pipe.
And I think I actually saw the accessory building text you guys have in a practice LSAT test once.
Oh, yeah.
But try to figure out.
Hey now. All right, this meeting's adjourned.
you guys have a good one.
Hi.
Hi, my name is Mike, I'm with WHI.
Hey, how are you?
Well, I was wondering if I could maybe get a couple comments, just some really audio about this, Alright,
Well, me.
this would be, I'm just looking for like a couple of 20 to 30 seconds. Can I have any of those for me or nothing? Dance to go with Jared. And I didn't want to talk about the lake. The open space versus what's available versus the requirements seems to be an issue. The open space.